Hi, my name is Elizabeth Foster and I am the founder of Connect Coach. And at Connect Coach, what we do is we connect experienced expert coaches with people that are looking for some profound changes in their life, in their businesses, or in their organizations. And today we are joined by one of our expert coaches, and his name is Greg Ballard. So welcome, Greg.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me.
It's so lovely to have you here. So, Greg, tell us actually, what is your speciality? I mean, we've got a couple of things that I know that we work on, that we position you in, but tell everybody here, what is your specialty? What do you do in coaching?
So I really specialize with leadership development and team performance. So those are the spaces that I really like to drill down and dive in, helping leaders become more effective in what they do, in being leaders, in taking the initiative. Leadership, I'm convinced, is broken down into principles, attributes, and disciplines. And so they cut across industry, but those things are what make a leader. And you're either effective or you're not. You're either growing and becoming more effective, or you're kind of where you are in that space.
So you work with leaders in organizations, and what kind of things would you actually do with them?
So depending on where they are, maybe they're a manager or they want to move into a leadership role. So we can kind of start with the foundation of core. What does a leader actually do, and what does it take for them to move into that role and really champion part of the organization? If they're already an existing leader, we can kind of get a sense of where their strengths are, where their opportunities are, and put together a program that would be very specific to their development in that context. It could be communication, it could be emotional intelligence, it could be some basic disciplines that would strengthen their leadership if they put a little effort into. And that really, it comes down to where they are, determining that, and then seeing what it is that they want to attain, and then putting a plan together to help them get there.
I like that. That's really cool. So, and I know that you also work with some teams, don't you?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So teams, I mean, I love teams. I've spent a number of years building and putting teams together, and it's always amazing to me what you can do when you pull a few people together that have a diversified strengths background, and how you can accomplish so much more with a small team or even a large team than you can independently. Yet, having spent some time in the workforce, not all teams are created equal, and not all teams are functioning the way they really could be. They're not really all reaching their potential. What I do know is that the highest performing teams, the strongest teams, are constantly looking at themselves and trying to improve. And so if you want to be a stronger, more effective team, you're going to invest in that. You're going to take some time to kind of see where you are and how you can make some improvements. It could be, kind of getting into an understanding, how does this team all trust each other? How do we communicate? How do we fight friendly? How do we have friendly fights where we're debating, ideas vigorously, so we can get to the best solution? And then what does it look like for execution? And so those things right there can all lend to increasing the performance of a team. But every team is unique and every team is different. And so it takes to kind of get a sense of where they are and what it is that they're sensing that they could do before we can really get to start working.
And I've seen that time and time again, working with teams and really seeing the difference between teams that don't have somebody in there, and the difficulties that they face with one another, and also doing their job. And then when you bring someone in that really knows how to bring the best of that team to the front, and the transition from where they were to and the results that can be attained from actually getting somebody in, it's the ROI of that is just out the window.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's really great. I had an opportunity just several weeks ago to head up to New Jersey and work with a pretty advanced level team, but they're typically spread out across the country and around the world. And so they wanted to come together and do some fun work and kind of improve just the relationships. And so that's what we did. It was very, very basic, but we had a lot of fun. And in the midst of that, conversation started happening. You know, the friction that they all feel came up. And it wasn't like the issue was pointed at an individual. It was just an issue that was discussed. And so that's just really encouraging to me to see that happen. When you get into that space, you start looking at, okay, hey, here's where here's the friction. How do we work on it together and make it better? How do we smooth this out? And those things can be accessed typically very, very easily, very, very quickly. If you have players on the team that understand how to approach it. And so when you have a player that isn't engaging that space, coaching can maybe help bring them along on an individual level.
Yeah, I can really see how that would make a big difference in the coaching relationships. Sorry, in the team relationships, not the coaching relationships. To really bring them together and make them much stronger, and the results, as I say, that would then ensue from that. So I'm always curious about, how does a coach become a coach? And I want to hear your story. How did you tell me a little bit about your background? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Oh my. Okay. So you've asked the question. For this to make sense, I got to share some things on the personal side. And so I'm going to do that. But I'm going to hit the salient points here. I think the core is that people, many don't know, but in this context, so I'm a child of divorce. And I was, relocated when I was 15. By the age of 16, I had made some poor decisions and I was moving into a street party life, party culture. And then I ended up running away from home. I didn't finish high school. It wasn't until 19 where I had a major spiritual, kind of transition towards Christianity, and that things started turning around. But from that point, I went on, earned an undergrad in cross-cultural communications and theology. And I basically committed to serving local church. And I had, access leadership very, very quickly, very, very easily there. But I'd made a living doing other things in the business and the professional space. And it was in 2008, I actually took on a role full-time for a local church and kind of went in headlong leadership, team development, because for those that aren't familiar with church spaces, that you hit a certain size, you're basically a leadership factory. And that's what everyone in the organization is doing, is investing in other leaders, developing them and building teams. And that's when I got engaged with coaching. Is in that space. And that just took my development to a whole new level. And then when I got basic concepts of coaching and I was able to apply them, it helped me to develop people faster. It helped me to bring teams together and make them more efficient, more quickly. And so you can kind of see the journey of where I came from and how coaching has helped transition just my own self to being more effective and being a stronger leader.
Yeah, I can really see that. So how has your life then, I guess, in a way, been actually affected by coaching? I mean, I can see certain ways, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So a couple of things. I feel I have grown through self-awareness. I think coaching is just definitely really taken me to a whole new level of self-awareness and continues to do so. Some numbers, if you will. I mean, within 5 years, I nearly doubled my salary. I was asked to take on and honored to take on a high-level role in creating and launching a new part of our organization in a different city. And then I've had the opportunity to impact dozens and dozens of leaders and individuals in their own development. And so that's just been very, very enriching for me.
I like that. It's and I can imagine that I mean, and I've seen it time and time again. People having experienced coaching it makes such a huge impact on their lives in so many different ways. I mean, it can make an impact physically, as you say, spiritually, in your relationships with everybody that you come across, and just that ripple effect that it actually has on your entire life. And I can really see that from you, so listening to your story, from certainly where you came from to where you are today. It's a huge transition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is. I kind of look back sometimes like, really, that's where I came from. But it's also encouraging to know that, like, if someone has the desire and is willing to do the work, what's behind them is really of little consequence. It's what they choose to start doing today and what they're shooting for into the future. That's really what sets people apart.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So we've talked about, some executives and managers and teams, but I'd like to drill down a little bit more about that, and who would actually benefit from working with you, and why?
Yeah, so because I'm convinced that leadership is based on a common set of principles, attributes, and disciplines. My target market, if you will, is not necessarily industry based. But who I do help and who I can provide a great service for is that person that wants to take their leadership to the next level and is really ready to do the hard work, to take a good hard look in the mirror and begin to develop themselves. And so those are the people that I can best serve. And it doesn't matter whether they're in leadership already. Maybe they want to attain leadership and they're ready to do the work. Maybe they're already at a senior level and they know they want to continue to invest in themselves. And so those are the people that I can serve the best, I think.
Okay, and that makes total sense. So tell me, you spoke earlier about evidence-based coaching. What actually is that? What does that model actually look like?
Well, so the coaching industry today, as many people know, is kind of scattered and very wide, and there's a lot of things going on in the coaching industry. And so one of the things that I would offer to clients and people seeking is to look at what are the models that particular coaches are using. There's a lot of different models out there, and there's one called evidence-based coaching models. And really what that says is this is a model that has been used and has demonstrated evidence that it's successful. And so that's really kind of baseline, is it's gone through a little bit more of a process, it's been scrutinized, and it's been demonstrated to produce a result. And so that's what we talk about when we're referring to evidence-based coaching.
It sounds really fascinating. It's a very in-depth conversation. I'd like to carry on more, but I would recommend anybody wanting to find out more to ask you. So let's talk about the results that you've had with your clients. I'd like to hear a couple of stories about what are some of the results that you've actually got with your clients.
Absolutely. And so just to put this out there, all of the people I work with, 100% confidentiality. I don't reveal who I work with, but I do have some liberty in describing a little bit about the scenario. I just don't reveal their names and leave that there. So I recently was working with a client, and actually we're still in some dialogue. She contacted me in the spring of 2016, sorry.
That's okay.
And we started a good conversation.
So do you want to pause a minute?
Yeah.
And deal with that?
Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can.
I know what it is.
It's a 2:00 alarm.
Somebody's trying to call me on my Hangouts, but I can't turn that off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a Google number that doesn't turn off.
All right, so we're just going to take that question again.
Sure.
So, Greg, I'd like to find out a little bit more, without kind of going into details and breaking any confidentialities, about the kind of results that you get with your clients.
Absolutely. So there's one particular client that comes to mind I've been working with for a while. She contacted me in the spring, just an online search, and we had a short conversation. And she was really looking for someone that could help her work through kind of personal relationship. And she had a background in past, and she had someone showing interest. And so she was really curious. And we got talking, we connected, but it wasn't the right time for her to make an engagement. And so we kept in touch via email every once in a while. We just kept in touch. And then finally, I got a call from her in the fall saying, hey, I've just moved, out of the country and I'm in a new role. And I know that you work with leadership development, and I'm now in a position to start an engagement. I'd really like to work with you based on that. And so we put an engagement together and we started working. And we unfortunately quickly found out that the scenario had changed for her when she was there. New leadership came in, and there was a lot of politics. And unfortunately, she did not retain that role. And so she ended up coming back to the States. And our coaching engagement was about getting her to the next place. And we coached for 90 days. And at the very end, she had secured her role. And but more importantly, she had gone through a deep process in shifting the way she saw herself and saw the world. And I've been getting emails pretty regularly from her about how this has had such an impact on her. And we're now talking about, kind of creating the next engagement. So that's one example of a client that I've been working with.
I love that. It's so great. And it's interesting, how sometimes when we start that coaching relationship, we kind of go off on the journey, and then something will come in and just change the direction a little bit. And then what happens is it's like just to be able to be flexible enough to go with that and to support that person through whatever it is that they're actually going through. I think that's very powerful. So it's lovely to hear that. So what would it actually look like to work with you?
Yeah, so I basically have a simple process. We start with a couple conversations. I cannot help everyone. I can help the people I'm here to help. And coaching is a relationship and a process. And I think a lot of times people want to minimize the relationship, and that's a mistake in my opinion. And so we have to spend some time, talking and working together and seeing if the chemistry for a coaching engagement is really there. So that's an important piece. The second piece is we have to determine, is the client or this prospect ready, for the kind of work that coaching is going to call for? And what do they want to accomplish? What do they want to see as a result? Is it, are they already clear on their goal? And now they just need to figure out what's in the way and how to get there. They need that support. They haven't been able to get there on their own, and they know they need, someone in their corner. Or maybe they don't know. And now we got to do the deep internal work and figure out what it is that they really want. So once we get that sorted out, well, then we can begin looking at, okay, how long is this engagement going to need to be? For some people, we can make some changes in a very short period of time. For others, it's going to take a bit longer. It could 6 months to a year to really see some real change. And so until we have an understanding of what we're dealing with, it's hard to put an engagement together. But then the other piece is some people respond to, regular, consistent, weekly sessions. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But others prefer, and they respond better to kind of less frequent, but deeper, a little more extensive. And so we look at that. And once we have all those pieces together, then I can put together a proposal of what I think a good engagement for them will be. And then we discuss it. And we kind of co-create this thing together. And then once it's right where we need to be, we lock it in, and then we go to work.
I like that. That's kind of cool. So you've got that you really take into consideration who the person is in front of you before you actually, it's not a cookie cutter, the one size fits all.
No, you're right. And this is why sometimes I don't have a coaching program with a set price that has this many, 90 days with me for this, because, and I can do that to make it easier to talk about in the marketplace, but I don't know that serves the client very well.
Yeah, no, I can really understand that, because we're not all the same, and it's great that you have that flexibility. So I found, we found out a little bit, or quite a lot about you as a coach, and who you work with the executives and with the teams. But I'd like to find out a little bit more about Greg the person. So tell me what you do outside of coaching to actually balance your life.
I spend time with my family, and we love to go see the sites here around Washington, D.C., which is where we live. And so I have two little boys. They're toddlers at this age right now, and we're celebrating another one coming very soon. And right now they beg for tickles. That's what they do. They just want more and more tickles, and I am happy to oblige them as often as I can.
And I would imagine, I mean, being a mother myself, I know that feeling of just playing with children and the joy it brings you. So that's a great life balancer. So I think that's wonderful. Um, so I mean, so let's let's straddle the two now between coaching. So us as coaches, when we're actually out there and we're talking to our clients, we're saying, okay, what is your goal? What are your ambitions? I want to turn that table onto you, and I want to ask you, what are Greg's goals and his ambitions outside of baby number 3 coming along?
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I've given this a whole lot of thought, and some of them are clearer than others, but I know there's a lot of them. And when I started down this journey, it was more like improving leadership and improving culture in organizations. Having been inside and seeing how organizations, large and small, can often be run, I say, well, gee, if the leadership was just a little bit stronger, if they were a little more aware, it could radically change the environment for everybody. It could radically change their business. And I said, well, gee, maybe I can help. And coaching could be a great model for that. And so, the other piece, it's kind of funny because these two things kind of converged in separate ways. Probably 2.5 years ago, I did that weekend workshop with the Myers-Briggs Level 2 facilitated, off in the retreat center kind of deep dive. And we did this process of trying to identify what your real mission is. And you pick two words. One's a verb, one's a noun, and improve leadership was the two words that came up for me. It kind of stood out off the wall in my mind as I saw them there. And then it kind of went away. And then I started down this journey, and it's kind of right in line with that. And so if I can help someone become a more effective leader or take their next step in leadership, I go to sleep very, very well at night. And I think there's opportunities. There are people at different levels in organizations or even in their own lives. People lead their own lives, and they I think, could benefit from just developing their own leadership style and their own leadership presence.
Yeah, I can see that. So for you, it really is about developing leadership, and it sounds to me actually that's an internal and an external process.
Yes, it is. I consider myself. I've got a lot to learn. I've got something to offer, but I've got nothing to prove. But I consider myself a people expert. And that's really where my passion is. It's been in people, as we mentioned before, my background in church and ministry. I've worked with people. I've heard the stories. I've listened. I've spent time with people at all different levels of life, dealing with all the kinds of things that we deal with as human beings. And so I'm not really shaken or surprised by much of anything at this point. But my life has really been dedicated to helping people move forward and to grow. Spiritually and character-wise. And so that's really where I resonate, and that's where I get my joy.
And I love that so much. And it sounds to me that really what you're doing is you're very much in that place of you're inspiring a lot of people to make a lot of changes in their world. But I would love to, who do you admire and why?
Wow. Yeah, I don't think about these people very much, but there's some people, there's figures in history, and I'm not going to get them all right, but I was just doing some writing recently, and Rocky Balboa. We all love the iconic Rocky Balboa, and it comes from like the streets of Philadelphia, takes all the punishment, all the beatings, and is the champion. We all resonate with that, and so Rocky has always kind of served as a little bit of a inspiration to me. He's a fictional character, but we all get it. We all get it. There's a number of leaders. I'll mention Frank Deno. He's actually the guy that brought me in and coached me for the first time, and chose to use coaching to develop me into a more effective leader, and kind of gave me that direction to say, hey, coaching may be good for you too. And as I read more and more, there's names that come up all the time. I know, Daniel Goleman, EQ, emotional intelligence, Simon Sinek, start with why, Amy Cuddy, the power positioning. Those are the thought leaders that I kind of look to. And there's so many people I learned from.
I think it's great, and I must say I've asked that question a few times, and I've never heard Rocky come up as an answer. So I love that. I think it's great. So coaches are all about change, and we support other people to make huge changes in their lives, and ourselves as coaches, we also make those changes in our life so that we can support other people to make changes in their life. But if there was one thing that you could change in the world, what would that be?
I'd change the way that we communicate. We all have our own narrative. We all tell our own story. We are addicted to story. It's always about story, and we create story for things that make sense to us, and that really people is we create our own narratives around whatever we observe. Whether it's a true narrative, an accurate narrative or not is irrelevant. It's a narrative that makes sense to us, and so that's the foundation of our communication. And so if we could change that piece, I think we would have a lot less conflict and a lot less tension. And so those narratives, I think, drive a lot of the division and angst that we see in the world today. And it comes right out into leadership and in teams. That narrative, that piece, that story we tell. And how do we know, and how can we test? How can we hold ourselves, from committing to that one narrative that we've got in our head? And maybe saying, hey, is it possibly a second narrative or a third? Let me investigate. Let me get curious. Let me consider, why did that person do that thing? Why would a reasonable, rational person behave that way? And all of a sudden we begin to see, oh, that's going on. And that changes our narrative. And then it changes the way we see the person. And now we don't condemn or judge them. Now we respect them and we value them. So, in a quick question like that, I would go with that. I think there's a lot to say about the narratives we create and how they drive our communication.
Oh, I think that's very powerful. And I agree. I think that if the communication in the world was, came from a different place within ourselves, then that would make a huge impact in the world. Greg, I have so enjoyed talking with you, and I just feel that we could carry on talking for a long, long time. And it's great. I've really enjoyed it. And but I just want to thank you for coming and spending this time and sharing your wisdom and your insights and your coaching knowledge, because I think that there's some very lucky people in the world that actually get to work with you, and I think that's very powerful.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you for having me. This has absolutely been a pleasure to sit with you and to talk with you a bit. And I look forward to the next time.
All right. Thank you so much indeed. Bye-bye.